went to sea in March '59 on the Iron Duke. She carried steel, iron ore, mainly between Newcastle, Port Kembla, Melbourne, Adelaide, Whyalla.
What was the size of the crew on her?
I would say off the top of my head it would be around about 45 or 47.
Oh yeah. What was her rough tonnage?
They was about 5,000 tonne, if I remember rightly.
Oh, right. What was your last ship when you retired in?
The last one I think was the Southwest, A&L, small ship. She was running everywhere, and I'd been in her a couple of times, and she'd been fitted out especially to carry timber from Tassie to Melbourne. They put two big cranes in her on her. And they were so big they had to build a bridge upon the bridge for coming into port because they couldn't see over the top of the cranes.
Oh yeah.
And so what you used to do was hook up another wheel and go up onto the other wheelhouse. And they also, I believe she had somewhere like 500 tonne of pig iron in the bottom of her to counteract the cranes. You know,
permanent ballast.
Yeah, permanent ballast, yeah. And then her decks down below, they'd load the timber into the square of the hatch, and the decks then moved out towards the ship's side and took the cargo with it. So as then the wings of the ship would be full of cargo, and then they would load the square again.
Yeah. And how big was she?
They was about somewhere around about 2,000 tonne, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What made you go to sea?
Well, my grandfather was a seaman, and I lived in Port Melbourne. We lived around the wharves, and I had uncles who went to sea, and then my father was a wharfie. I had a couple of uncles were wharfies. So I suppose I was born into that environment and followed in someone's footsteps. Yeah.
On your first jobs and that, what sort of gear did they supply? Working gear and stuff like that?
Nothing. No, in them days you never got nothing. Yeah. All you got was 2 blocks of soap and you change your linen.
Yeah. What were the wages like and the leave?
No leave. You would only get 3 weeks a year annual leave, but you had to do 12 months in the ship. And in them days, there's very, very few seamen ever got holidays because they didn't stop in the ship long enough. And another thing, what used to happen, most general cargo ships used to lay up at Christmas time and pay the crew off, and then they'd pick up after Christmas. So you was guaranteed you wouldn't get holidays.
Yeah. What was the food like?
Some ships were better than others, some were atrocious. We used to have food committees on some ships to try and get a better variety and a better standard of cooking. And as I say, some was very good and some was very bad. Something comes to mind, Howard Smith's. You probably know the old story about the prunes. Yeah. They used to call them Howard Smith's strawberries.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Looking at some photos you got in your bulkheads in there, there's good feeders, those jobs.
Well, the phosphate ships were, I don't know of any other ships in the world what would have come up to their standard. Turkey, crayfish, prawns, never heard of it. We used to have, our best meal on an Aussie ship was probably roast chicken at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was once a year. I've been on some real bad feeders, Norwegian ships when I sailed in the Norwegians. I was in one particular company, Wilhelmsen, where we had fish 3 times a day, every day.
Whether you liked it or not.
Breakfast, dinner and tea. You had boiled fish, raw fish, baked fish, fish pie, fish eggs, and fish... I used to finish up with scales by the end of the time I paid off her.
Yeah. In your time at sea, you would have come across a few characters, mate. Any that spring to mind?
Oh, gee whiz. There was lots. Who can I even... yes, there was one fellow out of Melbourne, Gus Guthrie. Just comes to mind. He's the first one. The antics that he got up to. They told me that he joined the old, very first Bass Strait ferry, the Princess of Tassie. And he got dressed up as a Gestapo officer, and he was goose-stepping up and down on the wing of the bridge. And the old man went out to see what the commotion was, and so he immediately got instant dismissal. Another one, when he rang up a painting contractor and got him to come down and paint the funnel on the Triaster. Another one comes to mind. But they had to be there before the mate got on board, an early start. So there was a bit of a furore over that. Another time he got dressed up as a priest, and he went into one of the old haunts in Brisbane and was counselling these two girls about their wayward ways of life. And the next thing, he got his hand stuck up one's dress and putting a hard word on him. But he was a character.
Any others jump to mind?
Gee whiz, if you've caught me a bit off guard, if I could...
In your time at sea, you must have come across some good times, some bad times, some highs and lows in the sea going.
Yeah. There was a Adelaide Steamship Company. They had a particular mate, a bloke called Anderson, and he was notorious. So that was one bad job I was on, and there was nothing but trouble. There was a meeting every day, and but he was never to get a skipper's job apparently, and he eventually did get a skipper's job, and I think that was the end of him then. He only got the skipper's job when they amalgamated with McElroy's and called it Associated.
He was skipper on the Moringa.
He was skipper on the Moringa, yeah. I was on the Barossa with him, and I got logged 2 days in a row. I got logged for 2 days' pay for being 15 minutes late. I got logged another 2 days for being 20 minutes late. Then I got logged £1 for swearing at the skipper and the mate.
Yeah. He was the prick that bloody when the Noongar sank.
That's right. Yeah, he wouldn't go searching for the survivors, and I think that was the end of his career then. Yeah. He had a brother in ANL who was a completely different character. They told me.
He was.
Yeah, I never sailed with him, but
they
said he was a completely different bloke.
But we had some good times.
Yeah, I was on a Panamanian tanker. I joined it in Italy, and it was supposed to be a run job. I was shipping out of Italy at the time, and I run into a chief engineer who happened to be an Aussie, and he got me a job on it. It was going to go from Italy to Japan to be converted into a bulk carrier. But anyway, we finished up getting another contract for 6 months, and it turned into a pretty good job. And unfortunately, in them days, the Panamanians didn't have a very good name as far as paying their crews and their conditions and all their safety standards. This company was one out the box. It was a terrific feeder. It was double the wages of a Norwegian ship, and everything was spot on. And it was a good job.
What were the wages there, roughly?
I've still got my payoff book, and I think I was on $600 American, 616 if I remember rightly a month. I think it was 616. I've got my pay book somewhere. And every so often, it might have been every 3 months or every 6 months, you got a pay rise, and that went on for a certain time.
Yeah.
Overtime was $1 an hour, and I think
American dollars.
Everything was American. We got paid in American dollars, and there was only one rate of overtime, if I remember rightly, and that was $1. Yeah. So that was $600, 616 a month. It doesn't sound much today, but as I said, it was double the Norwegians. I I was on one Norwegian ship where we used to work only 2 watches, 6 on and 6 off, 12 hours a day, and we got £5 a month extra. That was £5 sterling.
Yeah.
Which convert that over, and it worked into £7.5 £15 a month for working 12 hours, or an extra 4 hours a day. So the wages weren't all that crash hot.
Yeah. Now, one I've thrown in just especially for you on all your ships and that. You ever come across anyone who used to take pets and that with them? You know, like I don't know, carpet snakes or something like that. Used to frighten shit out of deck boys.
Yeah. I happened to be having a few beers one day and walking past a pet shop. Decided I'd become a zookeeper. So I bought a carpet snake and frightened the shit out of Wayne Finch and a few others. And
what ship would that have been?
Oh, that was on the Iron Chumbley. The poor old snake met a terrible end. Yeah. And you remember the next day, I think it was on the same ship, or a couple of days later, I finished up with a little zoo. I bought a couple of chooks and a dog and a cat or something. Yeah.
In your time at sea, would you come across some disputes and that on the vessels and that?
Yeah. Oh shit, yeah. Yeah, when the first year I was at sea, come to the end of 59, there was a campaign on for a new award. So anyway, we was sticking ships up every Friday night, and they'd sail Monday morning. So we'd keep them in port over the weekend. However, after a campaign lasting quite a while, we got beat. Judge Foster broke our overtime rates and that down to 4 and 4pence halfpenny for Sunday work and 2 and 2pence 1 farthing for Saturday work. So if I remember correctly, you'd work the whole weekend for 32 bob, which today is $3.20 for a full weekend. And the union was just about, it was getting mortally wounded. It was nearly broke because we were getting fined. The fine for $500 for every ship, however the costs were about £2,000 for every case. So that there we got beat. Yeah.
Which brings me next question. When you first went to see the pickup would have been, and the roster system would have come in later, wouldn't it?
The roster system, the pickup. Yeah,
where the bloke stood with the bit of paper under there.
Our pickup was run by the union when I went to sea.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah.
It was the same, what you're saying, it was a roster system.
Yeah.
No, the old bull system, that had gone, but I know all about it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Everybody else does,
and then Schedule C come in 64 and that. Yeah. How did you find the relations with other seagoing unions?
In the early days, we, the seamen, were more or less isolated. They was the dominant union on a ship because we had the most members, being the deck crowd and the engine room crowd. And everybody rode upon my feelings in them days was everybody rode upon the Seamen's Union's back. We got all the conditions and the other unions just flowed on automatically to them, which caused a lot of animosity amongst the members because we was doing all the fighting and the sticking of the ships up and battling away, and the others were getting it for nothing, so to speak. When I was in Scandinavian ships, it was a bit different. The officers were, a lot of them were knockabout type of fellas. There was none of this, yes sir, no sir. Some of the ships I was on, I used to knock around with the different mates. We'd go ashore together, get on the grog, which I'd never seen on an Aussie ship because we was kept at arm's length.
Yeah, leftover pommy bullshit.
Most of them mates on the Aussie ships done their time in pommy ships, and they come back. They've been sailing with black crowds or Chinese where they could stand over them, and they tried to do the same to us.
Well, it's mainly changed now, thank Christ.
Well, one little story comes to mind, and you're talking about the Triester. Now, I think it was on the Triester. There was a second mate there, and his first name was Richard. You may remember him. I can't think of his second name. So, one day I had a bit of a blue with him, and I showed him my arm, underneath my arm, and I said, "Have a look at this." And he said, "What is it?" I said, "I'm the same colour as you." I said, "I'm a white man." So he'd come out of one of the BI companies or something. But anyway, what I was going to say, some years later when I was on the wharf, the supervisor come, I was a delegate, and the supervisor come and got me. He said, "The skipper wants to see you." We're working on this little chiller ship with loading oranges or apples. So the skipper wants to see me, and up I go and seen him, and lo and behold, it's Richard. And he was sleeping on the deck in his cabin on a mattress. So he'd gone from old gold to boiled lollies, so to say. Yeah. So that's the conditions that he was living under.
There's only one or two real blokes I remember from the Triester. One was that evil little bastard, Evans, and the other one was the third mate. Yeah. Big old fat bloke who was I can't remember him. No, I don't know whether you were there when we had the rocket drill, and he was telling them how they fired the rockets across to put the suspension on San Francisco Bridge. And silly bastard, as he walked across, he's pricked the detonator cap, and you could follow the trail of bloody gunpowder and that. And he said, I think we had a nun or someone there, and he said, "Oh, we'll get you to fire this because the seamen are all too scared of guns and that." So anyhow, the nun gets up and he showed her how to fire it and everything like that. So she's hit the trigger like that and has gone, boom, bang, fell straight at his feet. That's how far it had travelled. Made a big goose out of him.
Yeah. Well, talking about that Evans, I was on the Triester, was up in Nauru, and at this time the Nauruans had got their independence, and you could get a drink and that ashore, and which you hadn't been able to do beforehand. So we was ashore one afternoon and for a couple of hours, and when we come back on board, there was a fellow there, Tex Boucher. So as we come up the gangway, this he was in charge of, he'd be the supervisor, he was a harbour master he was a harbour master. And he said to Tex, he said, "You've been annoying my wife, and you're nothing but scum." Tex said, "I haven't spoke to anybody." And he said, "Leave me alone." So anyway, this bloke continued on. Well, Tex hit him, he hit him once, I seen him hit him in the guts and dropped him. And Evans was coming down the other gangway, going up to the officers' accommodation. So he's seen this and went and got a gun. Well, anyway, there was hell to play, and Tex was after him, and Tex was going to flatten the skipper, and, well, he gets instant dismissal and he gets suspended. And then the harbour master realised he'd made a blue, and it wasn't none of the crew, and he sent a letter of apology, but it was too late. Tex had already been suspended. Yeah.
Well, there's a character, Tex.
Yeah, Tex, yeah. The last time I sailed with him was, I was relieving bosun in the old Bass Trader. And now, 3 of us got picked up, relieving. One of us had to take the bosun's job. So I'm sure it was Tex. He didn't want it. Laurie Rice didn't want it. So they left it to me, and I didn't want it either, really. But anyway, the next day, Tex was on the grog, and he got the sack the next morning. So we got him back to Melbourne, and then poor old Tex got the flick. But no, Tex was a good fella, and just if he got on the grog, he tried to let himself go a bit. Yeah.
I was just telling the old man on the way across, I'm going to have to let Tex know his mate has finally retired, Maury Coble.
Oh, Maury,
retired out the pilot service.
Oh, well, I remember Maury when he was an ordinary seaman on the, and I think it was a Triester again. I was in the Triester about 3 times, and he was a bucko there, and then he went for a ticket, and I'd never ever seen him again after that.
Yeah, he was pilot in Melbourne for the last 20 odd years.
Oh yeah.
He retired only a couple of months ago.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, and he was, and Tex didn't get on too good with him, or?
Oh no, Tex got on all right with him. Like, when he was on the Brisbane Trader with him, Tex wanted to be sacked, so he went up to Murray and he said, "Sack me." Yeah. Murray said, "No, I've got no reason to sack you, Tex." So Tex peed on his deck, and he said, "I'm still not sacking you, Tex." In your your time at sea, you would have had some hits or near misses?
Well, yes. My first Norwegian ship was a ship called the Porthos, Porthos, and I was in another phosphate company ship, the old Trienza, and we'd just been on the Christmas Island, West Australia run, and back to Melbourne, and she laid up for a while, and I thought I'll have a look around and see if I can get an overseas ship. So I joined this ship, what was supposed to be going to America, and it turned out it was going back to Christmas Island. So here I was on my way up to Christmas Island, half pay, or compared to Aussie ships. So anyway, on the way back she caught fire and burnt the accommodation out, and there was 3 blokes got killed. One was another Aussie who joined it with me, and there was 2 Norwegian boys, about 16. So that was one bad experience. And then I was on a Danish ship, and we was going from maybe Rotterdam down to the West Indies, and we run into a bit of heavy weather one night, and there was a mast on the top of the bridge with the radar platform, which would have been 16 to 20 feet above the deck. Then the next time I went on watch, the skipper showed me, he said, have a look at that. And the platform and the radar was bent hard up against the mast, and a sea had hit it and flattened it hard up against the mast. So now that was above the bridge, 20 feet above bridge level. So I thought it might have been wind and spray, and that might have, no, he said that was a solid sea. So we'd done quite a bit of damage on deck with strong backs and rails and that type of damage, and she was a reasonably new ship, only a small ship. She was about 3,000 tonne, I think, and I remember we had little radiators in the cabin, and they'd broke away, vibration and everything. Another old ship I was on, she was built in 1916. She was 48 years old when I joined. I joined her in England, and we'd done a trip up. This was in towards the end of 64, it was the beginning of winter. We went up to the White Sea, up to a little port called Onega, and a Russian port, and she'd nearly sunk the trip down before I joined her, cracked the mast and everything. She had deck timber on deck, and she had very high bulwarks with them big old washports, it opened out and everything. So she used to carry loose coal on deck. We used to put props up along the ship's side with chook's wire and all that business, and we'd cover the hatches, the tarps up with dunnage, and then they'd pour the coal loose to the height of the bridge, fore and aft. Well, we had our accommodation then was midships. She'd converted from coal many years ago to a little diesel engine, but she had these 2 fore and aft alleyways where we lived, and the mess room was in the middle on top of the engine room. And one night I went to get out the cabin door and I couldn't get out. The coal was about 3 foot deep along the alleyway. So there was a little butterfly vent in the door. And the mess room door was opposite my cabin. I sang out, and there was a bloke in the mess room. He couldn't also get out, but he got out from the port side door and come around to the starboard. So we had all hands to shovel the coal out the alleyway so as everybody could get out their cabin. If anything had have happened, we was trapped. Yeah. 9 out of 10 times we'd lose half the deck cargo. She'd get washed over the side. Then she used to carry, from Scandinavia back to the UK, she used to carry bulk paper in blocks, big heavy blocks. So they'd fill the holes up. Underneath the centre castle, they'd load paper, and in the forecastle and the after peak, which had been the old accommodation, it was empty there, they'd load paper, and they'd load paper on deck. And we used to cover it up with old bits of tarp and anything they could find. And I said to the bosun, what the hell are they trying to do to cover this up? And he said, oh, well, it keeps it a bit dry. Well, I realised what was happening. It was like blotting paper. Yeah. As soon as we'd run into a bit of weather, it used to double in its weight. And many a time she put her head under and I didn't think she'd ever come back. So anyway, that old ship, she went on to. She finally run aground at the age of 56, I think she was, when she run aground, which was old for a ship. But he did tell me about he'd been on a ship also, what had absorbed that much water in the paper that all was above the water was the bridge. And when they got her into port, when they opened up the holds, got rid of the deck cargo and opened up the hold, she was dry inside. But the deck cargo had absorbed that much.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So there are a couple that come to mind, the old Ram's Nest. And I spent I think I was on it for about 6 months, and I'd had a gutful by then.
Yeah. What about the stop-work meetings when you went to prison?
Yeah, well, we used to have a monthly meeting, and if I remember rightly, it was the last Tuesday of the month, or something like that, a long time ago. You'd get quite a big turn up in some ports, because there's a heap of ships in. There'd be a big meeting, and all hands in them days went, and there was very few seamen who never attended a stop-work meeting. But as time went by and the nature of the shipping changed, ships was in port less and less, and they spent more time at sea. Then the stop-work meetings went the same way. They weren't getting a great attendance. I don't know what happened in the end, but that was probably the beginning of small attendances, because there was nobody there.
December stop-work meeting in Melbourne, 10.
Yeah, disgraceful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was in the Scandinavian ships, well, we had one meeting on a ship I was in, a Danish ship, and we hadn't had any fresh food for 6 months. And we was down in a place called British Guiana, down in South America. We got the health inspectors out. We had a meeting and refused to sail the ship any further, and we was all suffering from dysentery. And out come the two health inspectors, and myself and the second mate and the chief steward, I think it was, went down to the freezer, and they condemned whatever meat was left. There was little bits of meat that was turning green. There'd be a bit laying on the deck there, here, and a bit over there, and it was all mouldy. So everything what was left was condemned. So the cook and his assistant brought all the meat up and was put on deck to go over the side. And one of the firemen was coming up from down below and caught the cook. He'd grabbed a bit of meat what had been laying out in the blazing hot sun, and he was cutting it up to make something for dinner, because we had no food. And anyway, we'd had a meeting, and the skipper asked us not to send the results of the meeting back to Denmark, because he'd be in trouble. Anyway, he went ahead, and I was going to get the carpenter's job. He offered me the boatswain's job, which I knocked back, and I was a foreigner on the ship, and I thought it was only right that a Dane take the job, but I'd been there the longest. So anyway, I thought, I'll take the carpenter's job. I've got no one to answer to. And so because of this meeting, he said, no, you're not getting it now. But that didn't worry me. So, but anyway, they sent the letter back. One went to the union, one went to the company, and one went to the Danish health authorities of some description, some government department. And the cook, the chief steward and the skipper, when she got to Denmark, I believe would have been in a bit of strife. Yeah. But usually the Scandinavians, even though some of them are terrible feeders, and there was no going back for seconds, there's only one dish, and that was it. That was probably the worst feeding ship I'd been on. Yeah, for that. They was trying to get down to Argentina to get their fresh meat and that when we got down to Argentina, but they couldn't make it.
Yeah. Well, that's roughly about it. You got anything you Oh, one thing I suppose we should say is you got a couple of brothers, or you had a couple of brothers who went to sea too.
Yeah, Terry.
Wharfie.
Yeah, Terry. Yeah, well, I give the sea away, Wayne, when I got married, and I continued on for a little while after I was married, and I said, well, if I don't break now, that'll be it. And I'd seen that many broken marriages.
Yeah.
Through Seaman and that, and going to sea and not getting home, because the leave situation wasn't very good in them days. And even though I'd worked under the system where you had to accrue 21 days, I think it was, 21 weekends to get you a couple of weeks off, or 3 weeks, whatever it was, every so often. But so anyway, no, I left and got a job on the wharf, and I was ready to go back to sea actually, and they opened their books in Melbourne, so I got on the wharf and stopped there for nearly 20 years, and then I had a couple of brothers. Terry, he went to sea, and then he finished up in the tugs, and I think he was in the tugs for 14 years, and then he got crook and he had to give it away. And then Malcolm, he went to sea for maybe 3 or 4 years. He wasn't there very long, and then he gave it away for some reason too. Yeah. So and then we all finished up on the wharf, and then there was another brother who was on the wharf also. But no, I like the sea, and I really enjoyed going to sea. It's a terrific life, but more for a single fella. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I sailed with you, sailed with Terry, sailed with Mouse, and worked with George when I was on the wharf.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so yeah.
I was only on the wharf for 2 years, on and off.
Yeah.
But, so I've been with a lot of you.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would have preferred to stop at sea rather than be on the wharf. But the wharf was good to me also. Yeah. You know. But I don't think it was as good as going to sea.
No, that's for sure.
But maybe I would have been dead if I'd have continued going to sea.
Especially if you kept scaring deck boys with friggin' snakes you passed.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you want to add, mate? That's.
Oh no, all I could say is I still follow all the events of the maritime industry. Whenever I get a chance, or anyone gives me a journal or anything, I still take a great interest in it, and all I could hope for is that one day we'll have a government that'll recognise the role shipping plays in this country, and unfortunately by this government it's just slowly been destroyed, and every time they've had a chance they've knocked it back and destroyed it and set it back, I should say, and this is the second time the government shipping line's been sold. Well, I think it's the end now. I don't think we'll ever see another one.
Yeah. Sold to the French, CMA, CGM.
Yeah. No, it's a shame, oh well. Anyway.
Right.
Yeah, another one that comes to mind, Wayne, was I was on a Norwegian tanker, the Brachara, and we just left Bremerhaven, I think it was, in Germany, and was going down the English Channel, and there was a problem with the boilers, and it was something to do with water. So they turned off all our water, and the only way we could have a shower was to pump up a bucket or two from aft and take it down to your shower room. And you'd have a wash in one cold bucket of water and sluice yourself down with the other bucket. That went on for 5 months. So after 5 months, I had a gut full of this, and the ship was perforated. I was down in the cofferdam, chipping the cofferdam, and went through the cofferdam into number 1 tank. So I thought, well, the time's come where I'll bail out. So yeah. I went back to Italy. I'd been shipping out of Italy, as I said earlier. I went back to the shipping office and put my name down. And he said, geez, it wasn't long in this ship, because the Scandinavians used to like to see you stop there for 12 months or more. And I said, no, they sold the ship. I told him they'd sold the ship. And he said, oh, all right. But anyway, I didn't need their service again because I'd joined another tanker. I'd run into the chief engineer, and he'd got me a job on this tanker. And as I said earlier, it turned into reasonable job. No, all these, some of these foreign ships, by Jesus, are some of the conditions that you really put up with, and food. Sunday I was in Talisman, the Talisman, one of Wilhelmsen's. Sunday morning was the best morning. You got 1 egg and 1 strip of bacon for breakfast. Lunchtime you got a slice of beef, a bit of mashed potato and a bit of cabbage. And for tea we used to have 2 sandwiches, a cheese sandwich and some other bloody meat sandwich or something. Then most of the meals after that during the week was fish pie, raw fish, smoked fish, fish eggs, fish cakes, and the list went on and on and on. That was one of the worst companies I'd ever been in. We used to get 2 stubbies a day, and the mate used to say to the deck boy, I was a mud pilot, so to speak, and I suppose just because of speaking English and being able to understand the pilots and that, he'd say, go and see if that drunken Australian saver to come up on the wheel. We used to get 2 stubbies a day. Oh, one night we were we're up off of Aden somewhere, and we're heading towards the Suez Canal. And the cook, who I used to have a talk to, the second cook, said, would you like some fried onion? I said, oh, I'd love some. He said, well, we'll get some onions and we'll cook some onions. A bit of fried bread. I said, righto. So into the galley we go, and he flashes up the stove. So we got these onions cooking and some fried bread, and the chief cook was a chow. And he come in, and away he went, and up he goes to get the chief steward, and the chief steward gets the skipper. And I see him coming down along the deck, and I dived my hand into the pan, and I grabbed a big handful of onion and a piece of bread, and I was out. And I left the poor old second cook to it. Well, they took the keys off him, and he wasn't to go in the galley unless he got permission. Now, the spud barber, who was only a young boy, a galley boy, he was peeling potatoes one day, and he had 2 buckets. And he had a little knife, and he's putting the potatoes in one bucket and the peeling in the other bucket. When he finished, he stuck the knife in with the peelings and straight over the side. The knife must have been worth at least 20 cents. So what they done then, they fined him 2 days' pay for losing the knife, and how they fined him was they give him 2 days off at sea, which he couldn't do nothing, but it cost him 2 days' leave. Yeah, for losing the knife. That's how hard they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's another thing, Wayne. I never knew what a good job was in them days. I didn't realise. And then looking back over the ships I'd been in, I realised that I'd been in some bloody good jobs on the coast here and didn't know it until years later. But anyway, one little ship comes to mind, a little explosive ship owned by Noble, the explosive company of the day. She was a Taranui ex-Bingra. Only a little job of, I think she was somewhere around 400 tonne net. One trip to Fremantle, Melbourne to Fremantle, was 16 days. So we put into. I don't think we moved off of Cape Willoughby. Is it over on the west, on the Victorian South Australian border, Cape Willoughby?
Somewhere there.
Yeah, and I think we was there for about 2 or 3 days. Never moved. Couldn't move. All we done was just had steerage way. So she was only a very tiny ship. So we finally get into Albany, and he put in there so we could all have a good night's sleep, and bail a bit of water out the accommodation. We had about a foot of water sloshing around, and on her we used to get 3 an hour, or today's figure 3 cents an hour danger money. I don't know what it was going to do, but that might have stopped it from blowing up, I don't know.
It could have, yeah.
So anyway, but she was a good little job, and we'd carry explosive to the west and load timber from Bunbury back to Melbourne. Then she'd load up to Cairns or wherever and over to New Zealand. But I was only in her for a couple of trips, and she was sold or she laid up, and that was about the end of her. There was about 3 of them little ships carrying. There was a Fairley, a little thing under sail, a Taranui, and another one I can't think of.
Didn't the Navy one, the John Monash or something, whatever it was called?
Oh, that was no. She was a landing craft. Actually, when I was on the Dalesford, we was under charter of the Army. We loaded Army stores in Sydney and went up to Port Stephens, and we laid up in Port Stephens there for a fortnight. And the Army was practicing unloading and loading and into that John Monash. And I've got a photograph of it.
Yeah.
There laying alongside. While we was there, we got ashore one night. He led us ashore one Saturday afternoon or one Saturday night, the skipper. Coming back, there was an army boat went off his head and dived over the side. And so I was only a young fella, and I went in after him and I got him. And the next morning, out comes the army brass. So I get word that the mate comes and gets me. I had to go up and see the skipper. So they asked me what happened, and I didn't want to get the fella into any worse trouble that he may have been in, so I just said I think he fell over the side.
I wasn't there in World War II. I was on the other side there, but I did hear stories of some of the stick-ups by seamen refusing to sail a few of the old ships there. And one time it came to a court case down in Sydney. The judge ruled in their favour. He said, I wouldn't sail the darn thing myself there. That it was so rotten there. But the being is that the armed forces took most of our good jobs and left us the old ones to sail around in. They took if the people care to remember about the Manunda, well, she was turned into a hospital ship. They took the West Australia, they took the Canemla, they took the Manura, they took the Manunda, and they took the Duntrue, and they took the Barossa. Barossa became a minesweeper there. All these good jobs those days there went to the armed forces and left the old ships there for the Aussies, the seamen, merchant seamen to sail.
Just one thing you better clarify, Frankie.
Right.
When you said you was on the other side, you meant the other side of the world, didn't you? You didn't mean you batted to the enemy.
I was thinking the same thing.
You didn't play for the enemy on that one, did you?
Well, as you remember that interview you done of me there when I was talking about the laying alongside in Guam there, and we refueled the Japanese fleet.
Yeah. We're getting a bit worried about you, Frank.
Jacob said to me, which side was you on? I had to explain there that at the close of World War II, we were alongside of Guam on a tanker, and all these Japanese ships after surrender, they had to get them back to Japan. Well, at one stage they were refueling the destroyers, the frigates, and the corvettes to get them back to Japan. Jacob said, which side was you on?
There's something else that came to my mind then. I was just going to mention it. No, it doesn't matter.
What was it about? One of the old ships of Barossa or one of them? Or,
it was when Frank was talking, but just something... Oh, I know what it was. Years ago they used to keep on saying about Australian ships can't compete with overseas shipping, and cost-wise we was always uneconomical. But right up until probably the late, or into maybe the 70s or late 60s anyway, the Australian ships had never been modernised. They was pre-war jobs, all built, in the 20s, the 30s, and most of our ships some could do 10 knots even, but most of them done 8 knots and 9 knots and 6 knots, and an overseas ship had come flying past you doing 18 knots, and then they used to say, but we can't compete.
Yeah.
But that was the type of bloody bullshit they used to go on with.
You just reminded me when you were saying you're alongside Cape Willoughby there for a while. I flew across to Hobart to join the Yarunga. We left that night. I went on the 8 to 12. At midnight, we're a beam of Tasman Light.
Yeah.
Went off watch, come back on watch the next morning. At midday, we're a beam of Tasman Light.
Yeah.
Went off watch, came back that night. Have a guess where we were at midnight? Beam of Tasman Light.
Yeah. Well, that was the same thing with that little job. And then the silly second mate said to me, keep her steady while I'm trying to get her a fix.
Well, that sounded like the Ampol when we left Sydney and went 150 miles south of Sydney there, off what's the bay there, the naval base.
Yeah, Jervis Bay.
Light.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jervis Bay.
I was on the 12 to 4 and I get called to go and watch at 4 o'clock. I felt the ship vibrating and that, and the weather was changing, and she'd been 105,000 baby super tanker, and we got off the perpendicular. I took over the wheel from Roy Barty, and he said, I can't hold the Franks, he's 4 points off now. And the skipper there, Peter Truscott, said to me, he said, all you can do is do your best. And so she went 6 points off before I could bring her back on course again. Now we were doing 16 and 17 knots, entered it, but to take the shock of the water, the pressure of the water off their bow, they reduced it down to 12 knots. Now this is a Wednesday afternoon of perpendicular light. But Wednesday night, at doing 12 knots ahead, she was still off perpendicular night. Thursday morning, she was off perpendicular light. Thursday night, she was still off perpendicular light, doing 12 knots ahead. And then in the first 16 hours, we'd gone 10 miles astern.
Yeah.
And a cheeky second mate to seaward of us, he said, who has the right of way in a case like this? It was Friday morning before we broke into it. And we got into Melbourne there a couple of days late. Yeah.
It's just,
It's 3 days we were in it.
Yeah.
one of them times on the Urunga, it come thundering down to the prom. I think we're doing about 12 knots, 14 knots, something like that. We had everything up our arse, we're hurtling along.
Yeah.
We went to go around the prom, still going full ahead,
Yeah.
half a knot astern.
Yeah.
We had to go back in behind the prom and anchor for the night before we could get around.
Well, there was one little ship, one of the little colliers, you may remember, the Willie Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think she ever got held up. Oh, geez, I reckon she was a good little sea ship. Yeah, I seen her in...
Willie Mac.
Yeah, the Willie Mac. And they told me that she hit a sea there going around the prom one time and lost a stove out the galley.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but the bloke used to... Well, I remember him telling me she was going around there one time and all the pommy ships and big overseas ships were sheltered around the prom. But I know why, looking back now, why they'd be sheltered around there, because they couldn't pick up a pilot. So it'd be no use going round to Melbourne, because they wasn't going to get in anyway, so they'd be sheltering around there.
Yeah, rather than railway guts it,
Yeah.
They tell me a fellow by the name of Finch has got the bell off the Willie Mac and you're not getting it either.
Yeah, yeah.
It might happen to be in his Maritime museum.
Yeah. I was in Sydney on the Corinda, and the chow comes one Sunday morning. We leaned over the side, a couple of us, and so he said, can you tell me what the propeller's made of? Yeah, anyway, I think it was made of bronze in them days. And I went and had a look down the engine room. So he'd just bought it.
Yeah.
So I went on board and had a squeeze around that. And I reckon they'd more fencing wire and baling wire down there than what was on a farm. There was pipes suspended with wire and... Yeah. I used to sell papers. I used to sell papers down the wharf when I was a kid, down South Wharf. I reckon I had the longest run in Australia. I used to start off at number 1 south, because all Hollyman ships used to go down there, 1, 2, 3 south and that, or maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 south. And then I'd go right through to the last berth, and I think the last berth was 28 in them days. It goes to finished up 32 or something.
Yeah, it's where our berth is 30.
Yeah. So anyway, I used to go on, selling papers and that, but getting back to the Easby, I've seen her, they'd be tying her up, this is honest, they'd be tying her up, they had the lines out and the wharfies were on board uncovering, ready to unload, as there was no gangway or anything, because they had a separate pickup, the Coleys, as you may well know. Yeah, and I'd never run into many blokes who'd sailed on her. Yeah. They'd talk about every other ship.
Easy,
yeah, but I never heard anyone talking about
That's
it.
the first time I've heard it mentioned for years.
Yeah, I don't even know who owned it. Might have been Patterson's or something, was it?
Yeah, I can't remember who heard it. I used to get the mix up with the Easby and the time went ashore in
Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Outside the head, so yeah.
But we're getting back to that bad weather, the business of ships at sea there, leaving Port Kembla one Sunday morning we'd left there. We left there a Saturday night there, and we ran into a southerly breeze, which turned into a bit of a gale. And Bobby Smith and myself and the day worker were having breakfast Sunday morning, and the watch on deck came running down, Bobby Andreessen, and he said, "All hands on deck, all hands on deck." And we said, "What's wrong?" He says, "Derrick broken away." We said, "Which one?" He said, "The bloody 4 of them." So we went out on number 3 hatch. So we went out, and the ship's rolling backwards and forwards, and here's four derricks, all swinging backwards and forwards across the deck. The chief mate and the skipper was Buttercup too, which was later on in the Dalesford. And they're with us out on the deck, and it was just like lasso and steers there. It was something out of a Hollywood movie. Yeah. Look out, here she comes across the deck now, and the boom had come swirling across the deck. We managed to lasso 3 of them, and as they came in there, we'd drop them in a hurry there into the drum of the winches there and lash them down. But one we couldn't get her. She kept swinging backwards and forwards until finally she had the Bill Burrow. She had those very big extortion. What do you call them? These stays? Piping there, big round one. Yeah. She kept on banging against that until she bent herself around at a 45-degree angle, and it was about 30 feet hanging over the side there with the wires trailing when we come into Port Phillip Bay. That's another story there about the bad weather at sea.
Well, you remember when that signal went aground?
In Newcastle.
Yeah. Well, we're in number 2 outer in Kembla on the Iron Wyndham. We had both anchors out. We were streaming full astern. We were tied up alongside the wharf, and we were still slowly and surely drifting up the wharf. Yeah. They called for tugs. 12 hours we'll call them for tugs to try and get us out of there. And the one of the Explorer class, the Flinders or the Dampier, I think was it Explorer class or one of the gong boats? Anyhow, one of them came in, and as fast as she was putting the springs out, you know how big them lines were, she was busting them, snapping them one after another. Well, she just went straight back to sea. Yeah. But we were there 12 hours steaming full astern, to keep us off the beach.
Yeah, well, we was there one night on the Iron Duke, the same thing happened, and up went the signals and that, and they getting all the seamen back on the ships, and as quick as we was putting out lines, we was busting them. So there was the Ellaroo was in front of us, and over at the other berth was a B boat, I think, a Barolga or one of them A&L B boats. And they both headed out at the same time. They'd snapped their lines, and they collided at the entrance there at the mouth of the breakwater. Yeah. And one done a bit of damage to the bridge, and but both got out. And then we was trying to hang back until our turn come, and we was loading all that tin plate, that tin plate. And when we got outside, she rolled and rolled. And the next thing, we had a bloody terrific list on her, and she'd all rolled to one side. Yeah. So we was near on the beam ends, and we got an escort up to Sydney. One of the naval ships escorted us up to Sydney, because they couldn't do much. I don't suppose they could pump much ballast over the other side in case something happened. And then if the cargo had to rolled back to the starboard side, well, then she would have rolled over, I suppose. Yeah, so anyway, we got into Sydney, and they had to restow the cargo. Yeah, well, that was a bastard of a job, wasn't it?
That Wyndham, when we got to sea, we had about half a dozen from the engineering mob on board, couldn't get ashore. Had a couple of women on board. One poor bugger, he leant over the after storm step on the starboard side, and he just spewed his ring up all night. Yeah. When we got back in the next morning, it wasn't even alongside, and I reckon he took a run and leap from about 12 foot off the wharf and did about 3 steps in midair, and he said, "I'm never going back up the gangway of a ship again," this poor bugger. He was crook. Yeah. But when we got to sea, we had all the gear flying still. We couldn't lash any of the gear. All the top deck and the tween deck hatchboards were everywhere. Yeah. The bloke who was on the wheel had to stay, he was 12 hours on the wheel. Yeah. He couldn't get from amidships down after that. Just hatchboards were everywhere. Yeah. But she was a mess.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was a bad place, Kembla, wasn't it, years ago? And then that little, there was a little foreign ship in there. She rolled over in the harbour.
That's right,
snapped on the crane.
Yeah, that's right.
The Wolfie blew about it.
Killed Savara or something, didn't it?
Oh, maybe a couple of them got drowned. The Wolfie blew and said it was something was dangerous. Yeah. And they all went ashore.
Yeah.
And
Then she rolled.
when she rolled, and then as they were taking the lift or something, the cable snapped, and she just whipped over.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah. So anyway, I'm on the Dalesford. We had a second mate who'd come from Johnny Burke's, and his name was John Banks. And so he comes to A&L and he's second mate on the Dalesford. So I'm on the wheel one night and we're coming down through the Whitsundays. And the skipper's in the chart room and he comes screaming up on the bridge on the 8 to 12. What the bloody hell are you doing with the wheel? He said, you're hard to port, you're hard to starboard, you're hard to port. So I let him rave on for a minute. And then I said, Captain, because I knew the skipper was in the chart room, can I have a talk to you? So the skipper went and had a talk to Banks and told him to get back into his cabin. And he said to me, he said, I'll see you in the morning. Well, anyway, when I seen the skipper the next morning, he said, oh, the man's got a bit of a mental problem. So I thought, I'll give him a mental problem, I'll fix him up. So I went and got a couple ball racers, ball bearings, and I smashed them up and I got all the steel balls out the ball race and I put them down the Punkaloover system. Then I got a shackle and I hung a shackle over the side. So as the ship was rolling, she'd go clunk, 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 and the ball bearings were rolling backwards and forwards in his Punkaloover system. So I thought, I'll give you, can't sleep, so I don't know how he slept after that anyway.
Yeah. It was the same Banks that was in the Denman there. And during the Hersey case, Murphy dispute down in Tasmania, Hobart, he was more or less backing them. Yeah.